When I first bought my A7 IV about 2 years ago, there were two lenses that I wanted to buy the most. One of them being the 35mm G Master 1.4, which is currently sitting on my A7 IV right now, and the other one being the 70-200 GM Mark II. And if we fast forward to the end of 2022, I ended up getting my hands on a 70-180 Tamron lens for a reasonably fair price, and so I wanted to test out this focal range before even investing in a lens that cost nearly $3,000. And I ended up loving it. The Tamron lens did everything I wanted it to do, but I knew that there were certain features and certain advantages that you get with Sony lenses that you just can't get with third-party lenses, such as breathing compensation, better autofocus, better contrast, better stabilization, and usually the most accurate colors out of a lens. Now I knew that if I wanted to get this 70-200 GM lens, I was going to have to wait until I had some extra money to buy this lens. I didn't want to go broke, and luckily, when the time was right, I stumbled upon a Facebook group where a Sony reseller had this lens for under $2,300, which was a much more reasonable price to work with versus $3,000. So I jumped on the opportunity, and now I sit here today, a couple of months later, with my thoughts on the 70-200 G Master Mark II. I didn't waste my time even thinking about the GM Mark I because the Tamron 70-180 was better than that lens, and at the time of my purchase, Tamron did have a version 2 of their 70-180 coming out, but I knew in my mind there would come a time that I'd still want that 70-200 G Master for its features. And there's a reason why this lens is regarded as the best lens in its focal range. And I quickly noticed that when I took my first photos and videos. I'm happy to say that I didn't regret my choice of buying it at all. So then, why do I feel so guilty praising this lens? As you first look at this lens, you notice that unlike most Sony lenses, this one is white. And if you look closer, you see the GM emblem on both sides, along with some nice customizable buttons, an aperture ring with an iris lock, autofocus and manual focus switches, full-time DMF, different focusing ranges, an optical steady shot with 3 modes. And I usually keep mine on mode 3, which is for unpredictability. Mode 2 is for panning movements, and mode 1 is just standard stabilization. I haven't really seen the difference of modes 1 and 3 that much, but mode 2 definitely has a priority on panning movements. Another great feature is that this lens zooms internally, which is good for gimbal shooters and not to get dust into the elements, which is one thing the Tamron 70-180 didn't do. And when it comes to looking at this lens, the build design is fabulous. It's lighter than the original version of this lens and definitely has great coatings on the front element. But the most important part of this lens is how it performs. And to be honest, if it didn't have all the bells and whistles on this lens, but it still performed the way it does, I'd still buy this lens. I would just hope that it would be a little cheaper, obviously. The very first thing that I noticed about this lens was the contrast and the autofocus. This lens's autofocus performs exactly how a G Master lens should perform. I rarely have problems with autofocus, and if I do, I feel like it's a human error and not the lens error, which is exactly what you want out of a lens. I didn't see any loss of contrast. In fact, I saw beautiful amounts of contrast versus what I saw in the Tamron 70-180 lens. I did research that the newer G2 Tamron 70-180 had better contrast, but when I saw it compared to the 70-200 Mark II, I can definitely tell there was still a wide gap between contrast. And in my head, I used to not care about contrast so much because I always thought that I could just add contrast in post, whether it's video or photo, but you still get that washed out look if your contrast is not performing well, no matter how much contrast you add in post. And yes, I do understand that this is just a small detail to bring up about this lens. It's definitely one that made me overcome accepting the G Master lens way more though. And now I want to note that I'm coming at it from the perspective of someone that makes money doing media professionally. And if this was just a hobby, that you wanted to spend the least amount of money on, there definitely is cheaper third-party manufacturers that hold their own. And this is why I feel so guilty, because the 70-200 Mark II is amazing, but it's so pricey and hard to tell anyone to get it. I definitely had a different perspective right now versus when I just got into photography, but the fact that I wanted these prestigious lenses drove me to make more money in this field and have that pay for my gear that I wanted. So I do see it as a positive thing, because maybe I would have been less motivated if I didn't see this awesome gear that I wanted to buy. And yes, gear is amazing and we always want great quality, but don't get it twisted thinking there isn't much more important things such as lighting and audio, which I've mentioned in previous videos before. Although me or others make it seem like gear will make or break you, truthfully, there's much more important things to worry about. With that being said though, let's get back to the camera features and performance. The autofocus was above 90% hit rate, and when paired with an A7 IV or my ZVE1, autofocus does a great job in video as well. When it comes to sharpness, I feel this is the sharpest lens that I've ever owned, but my 35mm G Master is definitely a second close. It's kind of hard to nitpick at this lens, and we could keep talking about how great the lens is as I show you examples of what this lens can do, but I do want to talk about the usability and versatility of this lens. So for my whole photography and videography journey, I always shot under 70mm. So when I first went beyond that range, I realized how far I can be while still capturing a solid image, especially in events and weddings where you sometimes need to be further away to not be so distracting, or to be respectful in churches. Not only does this help you get close to the action from further away, but I love using this focal range for close-up portraits and street photography as well. Most people would say a wider lens would be great for street photography, and I do agree if you live in a big city. Now, when you live in a small city with not that many high buildings, yes, the wide angle lens will do good, but sometimes getting a tight shot and focusing in on certain aspects of the buildings might make for a better photo. For some people, the 70-200 is a lens that they hardly use, but they know when they need it, it is going to be good to have it. The thing is, for me, it feels like the opposite, because I love this lens, and if I had the range to step back enough, I'm gonna continue to take this lens out. I only have 3 lenses, so if I'm not using this one, well, the next lens is my 35mm G Master, and my last lens that I have is the 16-35 f4 power zoom, which is a really great lens, by the way. But I typically use that one for real estate and my behind the scenes footage whenever I'm doing photo shoots or client work of any kind. So I do want to come back to the price, because it is a major factor when deciding to buy this lens, and I can only give you my perspective as to why I bought it. You have to figure out if it is justifiable for your needs. The way I saw it was this lens would technically pay for itself with the constant flow of clients that my company has been honestly blessed to have. So it didn't hurt as much. I feel like if I had money saved up and then bought this lens, it might have been kind of harder to just dish out $3,000. But remember that there are options, and you have the Tamron 70-180, the version 1 and the version 2, and then you also have the new Sigma 70-200 that is coming out. Or if you're watching this video later, then it's probably already out. And these 2 lenses will do the job that you need it to do. I would always recommend getting a cheaper option in that focal range, or any focal range that you're considered buying, before you even make a big purchase like the 70-200 Mark II. And that's why I'm glad I was able to get the Tamron 70-180 at a fair price, which is when I realized that I do like this focal range a lot, and I wanted the best that Sony can offer. Plus, you have to remember, I didn't get this lens at $3,000. I got it at a pretty discounted price. I can strongly say that I wouldn't pay $3,000 for this lens. And at the end of the day, Any lens is an investment. If you're going to make photography or videography a full-time job, you have to be able to calculate smart purchases. That's why I didn't buy it right away. I waited until I knew that this would be a smart choice. So make sure you come to a conclusion that best suits your needs. Beyond lenses and cameras, there are more important things that can change your photos and your next short film. Like I just previously stated. I don't have to mention it again. Audio and lighting. But yeah, it really is though. And it's more important than gear. And while this is a lens review, I have seen people that are stuck on gear that they forget about other great qualities, about giving emotions to your image. I truly want to thank you, so please subscribe if you haven't done so. I do appreciate it. Drop a comment down below, as I do read the comments, and if there's ever anything you think is wrong with the video or something that I could have done better, trust me, I always listen to feedback, and I think you should too. If someone gives you feedback that they don't like your photo, don't take it in a bad way. At the end of the day, you do have your own opinion and your own style, but you can always get better. Go ahead and click this video if you do want to learn some of the photography tips that I've learned along this journey. But with that being said, I am out. Also, I got a new tat and I cut my hair. So if you have been watching for a while, you know I have had long hair. So I went back to short hair, which was before I started all this gear review channel. But yeah, that's it. Now at this point, I'm just talking, just to see if you're still watching. And if you are, I appreciate you even more. All right, bye.